Okay. Hello, everybody. So lovely to see familiar faces out there. Happy faces. It's been a number of difficult years for everyone. Some people's hairstyles have changed, but I guess we're all the same. We've had a long history with Luck Corporation, and maybe I think about 20 years now, and it's a pleasure to have been working with you guys over that time, and certainly over the last week, coming back after some time away. Over the last few years, we've talked a lot about pivoting, reimagining, changing direction, strategic thinking, if you like, to try and move with the times, or change in necessary new directions, perhaps. But after much thinking and consideration, we've really just gone back to honour who we are and honour our land and our work and our wines. And so, honestly, we really haven't changed very much. I'm sure you'll recognise us from what I'm about to tell you about. So over a short amount of time that we have, I just wanted to tell you a little bit, a reminder about who we are and what we do and what we believe in. But also talk about organics a little bit, and the importance of understanding and developing connections of humans with land. So like Japan, New Zealand is on a molten ball of rock. In fact, we all are. That's spinning around in a vacuum around its sole source of energy. At some point, a Venus-sized block of rock came in and smacked into it, and then belched a piece of magma out into space, and that coalesced very quickly into the moon. And as that got further and further away from the Earth, the tectonic plates that were formed slowed down and started to form solid landmass. Over this time, the heavy stuff went to the bottom and the light stuff came to the top. Gases and liquids came up, heavy metals went down. In our place, New Zealand, one tectonic plate pushed under the other. So this is subduction, and the Pacific plate, which is sitting out to the east, had an uplift, orogeny, and pushed up and created these 3,000 metre peaks coming straight out of the ocean in the South Island of New Zealand. Because it came out of the ocean under pressure and heat, all of the rock that we're sitting on metamorphosized into schist. So Central Otago, down in the south of the South Island, is sitting on the largest block of schist in the country. This is a metamorphic rock, layered, compressed, foliated, so leafy. The mountains that were created through this uplift protect us in Central Otago from the westerly airflow. So these are 3,000 metre peaks. They come straight out of the ocean. All of the westerly airstream that comes over the ocean banks up, condenses, and drops about 5 to 10 metres of rain on our mountains. This creates a rain shadow. On the mountains, it's one of the wettest places in the planet. So extremely high rainfall on the tops of the mountains. But as it goes east, it dries out to the extent that by the time it gets to Alexandra, further into the middle of Central Otago, now you have New Zealand's hottest and coldest and driest place. That sort of diurnal range creates a volume, but it also creates a purity and a clarity of fruit. Where we are, closer to the mountains, right up against the main divide, we don't have as much volume in fruit quality. It's much more about precision, detail, and articulation of tannins. For example, thank you, my wonderful assistant. Here you go, the mountains up the top here. These are glacial mountains, 3,000 metre peaks. So you can imagine the pressure coming over this mountain high pressure, and then this is an inland basin, so expanding into the inland basin, decontracting, becoming softer before it carries on down the valley behind us and becomes hotter and colder and drier. Obviously next to the lake, this is a big thermal mass, so again, another temperance device. Wanaka, which is the name of our town, has the same root word in Māori as wānanga, which means workshop or a place of education. So Wanaka, this inland basin, is somewhere, a soft inland camp where you might want to rest and bring up your children. It gives this idea of temperance. So without the same diurnal ranges, without as much heat or as much cold, you get a sense that the phenolic detail of the land, all of the precision that comes through the dry matter of the wine, is a lot closer to the surface. It doesn't have much flesh on the top of it. So our wines are mountain wines. They're all about precision, articulation, and detail are our hallmarks of our wines, if you like. So there's a long history of pre-human history of flora and fauna that exist in this place before humans came along, of course. And then there's also a pre-European history, Māori history in here. But from our family's point of view, we arrived in this environment, in this place in the late 1800s. And after falling in love with this area, our great-grandfather, Percy Sargood, bought Wanaka Station in 1912. The potential of viticulture in our region and on our farm was understood right from the beginning in the late 1800s, but it wasn't until our father and mother returned to the family farm in the early 70s and started experimenting with vinifera that potential started to be realized. By that stage, everyone in New Zealand, common wisdom in New Zealand was that nothing could grow, vinifera couldn't grow successfully this far south. We're right in the south of New Zealand. But despite that, from his own experimentations and observations, our father, Rolf Mills, was convinced that it was possible to grow quality Pinot Noir, quality Vitis vinifera in Central Otago and in Wanaka. So he started out with an original stock. Well, they started out with original stock of about 20, 25, 30 different cultivars, as much plant material as they could find around New Zealand from government research stations to colleagues they'd met, and planted it down in the vineyard, and then over time took cuttings from the best performing varieties and the best performing vines and planted them out through our own nurseries, and then over time selected down to the 6 varieties that we have today. But this is a period of observation and empirical understanding of what plant material is most comfortable in our environment. There's a few things that come out of that. The first thing is that most of our vines, in fact, all of the mature vines that you see in the wines that are here in Japan, are from Vitis vinifera straight into the ground. So very fine articulate root hairs getting into the land, at risk of phylloxera, but we are pre-phylloxera. They've been organic virtually since the inception, and irrigated, not irrigated I should say, since about 2003. But most importantly, they are comfortable in their environment. That's to say, if we don't need to add sugar, water, nutrients, vitamins, yeast, adjust and must, that's because of the long and hard work that was done to select the right plant material for the site over time. There's of course some very successful models in New Zealand and elsewhere where people that have fallen in love with wine, either in I don't know, Italy or France or elsewhere, have gone around and tried to emulate that culture, have tried to find a soil type and a climate where they can emulate a culture from elsewhere. That makes sense to me, and it can be very successful, but it's not our model. Our model comes from a long-standing relationship with a singular piece of land, and then an adaptation of the plant material, the culture, to that land, rather than the other way around. So we didn't become Pinot Noir and Riesling growers, for example, because we fell in love with somewhere else or fell in love with those varieties and wanted to grow them at our place. It's that we had the land to start with and developed a culture, and through that development found out that certain varieties found themselves more comfortable in our environment, and therefore educated ourselves in the places and in the ways that would help us grow those varieties better. The really most important thing for us to understand, or for you to understand about who we are, is who Ripon is. We farm our land as having its own individuality, its own sense of self. So Ripon for us is not just a farm or a brand or a wine. It's actually a place, and it has its own unique identity. And part of our work is to try and maintain a culture that in turn maintains a relationship with that individual. And of course, as soon as you grant a thing or a river or a place, as soon as you grant it an individuality, or you animate it, you give it life, even if just in grammar or in language, your relationship with that thing or that place changes. And that's what's happened at Ripon. We ask in a decision-making process, what would Ripon ask of us in this situation? And that's really valuable. So that's why on the Ripon Mature Vine Pinot Noir, you see that it's repeated on the label. Ripon. So Ripon is also a lieu dit. It's not just a brand. It is a place name, but in this case, unlike Emma's Block and Tinkersfield, it's not a singular klima, a singular site. It's the farm voice as a whole. So if we're talking about the individuality of our farm, this is that individual expressing itself, hopefully to its potential, in something that we can taste and feel. So Ripon is like a Steiner version of terroir. It's not just a singular site, it's not just a klima, which are both very important types of terroir and successful models. And we can talk about those models within Emma's Block and Tinkersfield, a parcellated singular site. But another type of terroir is the complete farm voice. We say it's the handshake at the start of the day and the beer at the end and everything in between. So it's our culture, it's how we relate to the land, it's the land itself and that individual, it's the whole farm. So this wine, again, our most important wine, the one that we make the most of, Ripon Mature Vine Pinot Noir, is from vines that are planted between 82 and 2000. They're nearly entirely on their own roots, unirrigated, biodynamically farmed. They're all hand harvested. They are fermented in small 2-ton microferments without inoculation or adjustment. They stay 14 to 28 days on skins, are pressed off, and then run into barrel for 16 to 18 months, and then run into bottle without filtering or fining, and then stay in bottle for at least a year, sometimes, as in this case, 2 years before release. So they've had time to decompress and expand and be ready for market, because they are quite compressed when they're young. And so if Ripon is the orchestra and the collective voice of the farm, then within the orchestra you'll have two, possibly more, but two that we put under bottle, two singular soloists that can that we allow to have a voice in bottle as well. Emma's Block and Tinkersfield. Emma's Block, slightly east facing, down closer to the lake, so it has it doesn't have quite as much afternoon sun, which gives it a freshness. Obviously it's next to the lake, which is the thermal mass as well, so it doesn't get as much warmth, certainly in the afternoon, which can give it a little bit more, let's say, brightness and animation in the front palate, sort of more on the red fruit spectrum, if you like. But because it has some clay lenses, some ancient lake bed clay lenses, they're like sausages of very young clay running laterally through the block. It gives it a little bit more mobility and fluidity in the phenolics. The tannins are just a little bit more sleeker and mobile, especially when the wine's young. Emma was the last Ripon in our family. She was our great-great-great-grandmother. Yeah, that's where the name comes from. The vines were planted, again, on their own roots in 1992. So these are, again, mature vine wines. And the production is exactly the same as the Ripon and the Tinkersfield. Right next door to Emma's Block is Tinkersfield. Tinkersfield is named after our father, Tink, who grew up imagining that and believing that viticulture was possible in this field and what was to become Tinkersfield. It's not on a north-facing slope. This is Tinkersfield here. Emma's Block east-facing down here. It's north-facing, so it does get a little bit more afternoon sun. So it's a little bit riper and more giving, slightly more generous in the front palate. But because it's on pure schist, it's much more compressed and detailed, particularly when it's young, needs time to decompress and expand. Tinkersfield was planted between 1982 to 1989, so represents the oldest vines in our vineyard and certainly some of the oldest vines in the region. Again, on their own roots, unirrigated, biodynamically farmed, but mainly it's on these stacked coarse schist gravels. So you've got a lot of root, what we call root tortuosity. It's the distance the roots travel down. They have to travel far further, and so you've got a huge amount of surface area of root mass in contact with the rock, which gives more precision and detail again. Hello Japan, hello everyone. It was amazing to see so many of you out there in the last week that I've been here. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to see everyone, but really special to be back. It's always a pleasure to come here and experience what I wish my whole team could experience, is the love for Ripon. Clearly there's a lot of it here in Japan, and really just the focus on detail. Our wines, as you know, a lot about detail, articulation, precision, and I get that back from you as well. Everyone wants to know the questions, the whys and wherefores, and that excites me, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about things that I love: land, our place, people, our family and our team, and our wines, and that's just something I love doing. So thank you for the opportunity. Hopefully, if I didn't see you this time, I'll see you on next time. Those that I did see, I look forward to seeing again, either here or back in New Zealand. Love you very much. It's always an absolute treat. Thank you.